There's a film I've seen more times than I could count, and a few nights ago, a line in it stopped me cold. I was in my chair, in the dark, just the light off the screen moving on the walls. There's a scene near the end where an older man says one quiet line to a younger one. Nothing dramatic. I've heard it 100 times. It was always just part of the furniture of a story I love. And this time, it undid me. My eyes went hot, and I had to sit still after, because nothing on that screen had changed. Same line, same actor, the same light it's thrown on my walls for 20 years. And I didn't understand why. So I sat there and asked myself a question I couldn't answer. If nothing in the story moved, what did? Maybe you know this too. Maybe you've got the shows you return to, the ones you already know the ending to, and every so often, something in one of them reaches you in a way it didn't used to. And you've wondered, if you wondered at all, what that was about. I'm Daniel, and that question sat with me for a long time. Why do I keep going back to stories I know by heart? And why did that one just feel new? I told myself a few answers over the years, and each one was a little true, and none of them was the real one. Let me take you through them, because the real one changed how I think about all the time that's gone by. The first answer, the easy one, is comfort. And it's not wrong. There's a real ease in a story you already know. Real life doesn't tell you what's coming. It just keeps happening at you, one thing after another, no warning. A story you've seen before is the one experience you can have where nothing can surprise you. You know the hard part is coming, and you know they get through it. You can relax in a way you almost never get to. At the end of a long day, when I don't have it in me to be surprised by one more thing, I put on something I've seen 100 times, and I let it be easy. So comfort explains why I reached for that particular film, that particular night. I'll give it that. But it doesn't explain the rest. It doesn't explain why it's that story, and not just any easy thing. It doesn't explain why this one has followed me for 20 years, while 100 others I watched once are gone from my memory entirely. And it doesn't explain at all why a line I knew cold suddenly felt new. Comfort is about things staying the same. What happened in the dark that night was something changing. Comfort wasn't the answer. It was just the first door. So I tried a deeper one. Certainty. Because I think part of what draws a person back to a known story as the years pile up is that so little else will tell you how it ends. You get older and you start to feel how much of your life is unfinished business, questions that won't resolve, people whose stories with you just stopped mid-sentence, roads whose endings you'll never see. Life is nothing but loose threads, most of them. And here's a thing with a shape, a beginning, a middle, and an end that arrives on time, every time, exactly as promised. In a life full of things that never got to finish, a story that always finishes is a strange kind of relief. That one's truer than comfort. It goes deeper. It's about the ache of not knowing how your own story comes out, and reaching for one that always keeps its promise. But it still wasn't it. Because certainty is about the future, about not knowing what's ahead. And what happened to me in the dark that night wasn't about the future at all. It was the past that had changed. A line from a story I'd known for decades had somehow become a different line. Certainty about the ending couldn't explain why the middle felt new. So I set that one down too, and I went further. The third answer got closer, and I could feel it getting closer. Continuity. Everything moves. That's the thing you don't understand when you're young, and you finally understand too well when you're not. The people move, some closer, most further, some all the way gone. The places change, or you leave them. You yourself change so much that the person you were 20 years ago would be a stranger to you now. Might not even like you. Might be disappointed or amazed. You'll never know which. Nothing holds still. You reach back for solid ground, and your hand goes right through it because the ground moved too. And then there's this story. Exactly where I left it. Every time. The same light on the walls, the same line in the same place, the same ending arriving right on schedule. In a whole life of things that wouldn't stay put, here is one thing that stayed. Perfectly. It is the one fixed point I have. That felt like the answer for a while. I need one thing that doesn't move, and this is it. But there was a problem with it, and the problem is what finally cracked the whole thing open. Because if all I wanted was one thing that never changed, a photograph would do it. A photograph doesn't move either. But I don't sit in the dark for 2 hours in front of a photograph. There's something about a story, a thing you go all the way through, start to finish, and come out the other side of, that a still image can't give. So it wasn't just that it held still. It was that I keep moving through the same unmoving thing, over and over, across my whole life. And I couldn't yet see why that mattered so much. But I was almost there. Here's where it finally came to me, in the dark, still sitting in that chair. The story didn't feel new, because the story changed. It felt new because I did. And the only reason I could tell, the only reason I could feel the change at all, is that the story held perfectly still while I moved. Think about what that actually means. You can't measure how far you've walked against ground that's walking with you. You need something that stays put, a mark that doesn't move, so that when you come back to it, the distance between where you are now and where the mark is tells you exactly how far you've gone. The story is that mark. It stayed exactly where it was, so that every time I return to it, it shows me, with a precision nothing else in my life can manage, how far from my old self I've traveled. I know this because I can feel the different men I've been, each one measured against that same unmoving scene. When I first saw that film, I was young, and that older man who says the line near the end, I saw him as the hero of the whole thing, wise, someone I wanted to become. I measured myself against him and found myself wanting, the way you do at that age, and I thought, one day I'll understand what he understands. I watched it again somewhere in my 40s, in the thick of my own life, and the same man struck me as a bit of a fool, passive, a man who'd let things happen to him and dressed it up as wisdom after the fact. I'd become someone with opinions by then, someone a little hard, and I met that same scene as that harder man and read him completely differently. The scene hadn't changed a frame. I had changed so much that a hero had become a fool. And that night, a few nights ago, in the dark, I saw him as neither. I saw a man near the end of things saying a true thing to someone too young to hear it yet, knowing they couldn't hear it, and saying it anyway, gently, because that's all you can do. And I understood, finally, that the line was never about the young man at all. It was about the cost of being the old one. And it landed new because I've become old enough to be him now. And the 20-year-old who first saw a hero and the 40-year-old who saw a fool were both just standing at different distances from the same fixed mark, seeing what they were close enough to see. That's why I keep going back, not for comfort, though it comforts, not because it ends the same, though the ending keeps its promise. I go back because it's the one thing that held still long enough for me to see myself move. Every rewatch is me returning to the mark to check where I am now. The story is the ruler. I'm the thing that keeps changing length. I won't leave out the hard part, because there's a hard part, and it's the whole other half of this. The mark that shows you how far you've come shows you everything you left behind to get here too. When I saw a hero in that man, I was a person who believed things I don't believe now, who hoped for things I've since let go of, who hadn't lost the people I've since lost. That young man is gone. I can't get back to him, and honestly, I wouldn't want all of him back. But the story lays him out so plainly every time that I can't pretend he isn't gone either. The fixed thing doesn't just measure the distance, it makes the distance impossible to look away from. And it's not only the selves. The first time I saw that film, there were other people in the room. It was a brighter room than this one, lamplight and voices, and someone beside me who laughed at the parts I laughed at. The room I watch it in now is dark and it's quiet, and it's just me and the light off the screen. The story is exactly as full as it always was. The room around it emptied out, and the unchanging story sitting there in the dark makes that emptying very, very clear, because it held everything it ever held, while I lost some of what I brought to it. That's the cruelty folded into the tenderness of it. The story doesn't age. It sits there being exactly what it was, warm and whole and lit, and by holding so perfectly still, it shows you, kindly, relentlessly, every year that passed through you, every version of you that came and went, everyone who used to be in the room and isn't. It doesn't change, and that's the comfort. It doesn't change, and that's the ache, both at once. The one thing that stayed is the one thing that can show you everything that didn't. I'll leave you with this. You don't keep returning to the stories you know by heart because you've run out of new ones. You return because they're the fixed mark in a moving life, the one place that held still long enough for you to stand beside it and see how far you've come and what it cost you to come this far. The story stayed exactly where you left it. You're the one who keeps arriving as someone new. And every time you go back, it quietly tells you the truth. Nothing else will say straight. Look how far. Look what you lost. Look who you are now, measured against the one thing that never moved. Tell me in the comments, is there a story you keep returning to, one you know by heart, and has it ever shown you how much you've changed since the first time? I'd like to know. I don't think I'm the only one sitting in the dark, measuring. And if you want to sit with me again, subscribe. I'll be here. I'm Daniel. I'll see you in the late hours.